Azeroth, and welcome to episode 130 of the World of Goldcraft. As usual, I'm your host, the Lazy Goldmaker of thelazygoldmaker.com, and I'll be talking about goldmaking for about 20 minutes now. Of course, if you're following along live, then make sure you post your questions in chat, and we'll get to them at the end. And if you're not watching this live, then be aware that you can catch the show live at about 2 p.m. or 1400 Central European Summertime at Twitch TV/LazyGoldmaker. So let's dive right into talking about the game. But there's nothing going on in the game right now. The 9.1 PTR is out, and I talked about that last week. I've tested it out a little bit. We don't really know anything yet about the crafting systems outside of the fact that there will be an optional reagent for upgrading base legendaries. That's the only thing we know. Everything else is who knows. So not much to do about that. We'll see once they unlock and once they add more content to the PTR, then we'll be able to eventually test exactly how this crafting is going to work. But currently, nothing. As far as events in game goes, this week has literally nothing going on outside of the ordinary. There's the World Quest event, so you can catch up on some rep with the Shadowlands reputations. But outside of focusing on doing that weekly quest, there's literally nothing to do. There's nothing special, no Darkmoon Fair, no world events, no nothing. Just a completely regular week. So just do gold making as usual, and you should be doing well. So that's about it for what's going on with the game. Now, for this week's episode, I wanted to talk, or the discussion point, this week, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the Burning Crusade. So I talked about Burning Crusade a couple of episodes ago. But in that episode, I was talking more about my overall thoughts on the return of TBC with TBC Classic and how the game would play on on my plans for it a little bit and just on a very high level. But today I thought I'd dive deeper into the gold making aspects of TBC. And when I did, I got a lot more motivated to play TBC. So maybe I'll spend more time there than I expect. We'll see when it comes around. I'll for sure be checking it out when it launches, and then we'll take it from there. Now, in TBC Classic, as in literally every other incarnation of WoW there's ever been, the main ways you make gold is the same. You are going to find and farm or flip or craft items that are related in some way to giving players power in game. That's what most people care about. So that's going to be stuff that increases their damage, stuff that makes them gear up faster, stuff that helps them in raids or in dungeons. That's going to be the main thing. There's also obviously a market for things that make you look cool, but there isn't transmog in TBC yet. So that's going to limit that market a little bit. So the vast majority of player resources will be going into increasing their character's player power. This means gear, this means consumables, this means item enhancements like enchants and gems with dual crafting coming, and all of those items are going to be the main way to make gold. And then, of course, everything else is going to feed into that. So materials, you can always make money with materials because materials can be used to craft gear or craft consumables or craft something else that's going to increase player power. And that those finished items at the end of the day, that's the main thing that players are willing to spend their gold on, and that's where you'll be making it. Now, I'm going to talk about consumables first. And I made a lot. I probably made most of my classic gold with consumables, and specifically making tons of alchemy consumables and selling them. Back in Classic Vanilla right now, it's truly the Wild West when it comes to stacking potions and elixirs. You could stack almost everything, as well as using potions at will almost. I think there are some of them that have a shared potion cooldown, if I remember correctly. Now, with TBC, they start streamlining consumables. So elixirs and Flasks are now split into Battle Elixirs and Guardian Elixirs, and you can only have one Battle Elixir and one Guardian Elixir active. And Flasks are going to count as both the Guardian and the Battle Elixir. So if you have a Flask active, then you can't use Battle or Guardian Elixirs. Since Flasks persist through death, and generally, from what I looked at, have the strongest throughput increasing effects, so they are generally the best in slot Battle Guardian Elixir combo is going to be the Flask. I expect people will be using a lot of Flasks in TBC. Now, of course, this is going to depend on the cost and availability of materials. In Classic, there were some casters who used the Flask of Supreme Power, and obviously a lot of speedrunners and tanks used the Flask of Titans. But outside of that, other classes couldn't get DPS increases from Flasks and didn't use them as much. So it will depend on the availability of Fel Lotus, which if I remember correctly, is not on the same kind of heavily limited spawn schedule as the Black Lotus was. But it does seem to be the clear BIS option. It's going to be Flasks, and thus crafting Flasks and getting those recipes is going to be very profitable. There will be a large market for this. And there will obviously be a large market for all the other consumables. There's not just going to be Flasks. There's the addition for the first time of DPS Potions for everyone. So there are potions that can actually increase your DPS output, which wasn't the case in Classic for most classes. There were some differences, like warriors could get a Mighty Rage potion, which was very useful. Some other things, but this time around you're going to have DPS increasing potions, healing output increasing potions that are going to be on a 2-minute cooldown. So those are obviously going to be very popular. People who raid always want to do the best. And I think a lot of people with the speedrunning meta in Classic, I think a lot of people will continue with the speedrunning meta in TBC. And will be focusing on optimizing their raids, on running them as fast as possible. Most people who play Classic will be used to some level of consumable requirements, even in pugs. And some of the potion effects looked very strong from what I could see. So stacking those with the DPS cooldowns is going to be really, really good. There are also, interestingly enough, there are some Classic consumables from Vanilla or Classic or from the current content that are still relevant. So this includes, amongst other things, the Brilliant Wizard Oil from the Sandalar tribe reputation. And the Classic Flask of Supreme Power is a good, potentially cheaper option compared to the TBC Flask for casters. There's also Dark Runes from Scholomans that are still very useful because they allow you to regain mana without using a global cooldown, which is a huge DPS increase for those classes, assuming the GCGs are as packed as they were in Classic. So there's definitely a lot. There's still a game with an absolutely crazy large amount of different consumables. So I expect consumables will still sell really well. And since they will be using the old auction house where you can sell in specific stack sizes, it will be very easy to generate 20-30% higher prices than the cheapest ones and still get sales, which I got throughout all of Classic. I was never the cheapest potion seller on my realm. I always got sales. Always. Every day. It was so easy. Just to utilize different stack sizing, and someone will come along and they'll just want 3 of that potion, and you have it at just 3 in one stack. But it's 5 gold more total, and they're like, whatever, I'll buy from this guy, and then you'll be happy. In addition to this, we will see weapon oils and sharpening stones, just as in Classic and Shadowlands currently, with the caster weapon oils being crafted by enchanters. But interestingly, at least for warlocks, the best one is the one from Vanilla, while sharpening stones will come from blacksmithing. So that gives both of those professions a little bit of a boost in terms of consumable crafting. Cooking will also be providing food buffs as usual. This includes both stamina buffs and various damage and healing throughput increasing foods, which will be the main ones people target. Generally, it depends a little bit on tuning, but most likely people are going to focus on getting damage from their consumables. Now, there's once again a huge number of consumables with even different options. Like there are foods with the exact same effect, for instance. So there's a lot of them to craft. I would focus primarily on the best in slot options for some of the top tier classes in Burning Crusade, which includes Beast Mastery Hunters, Warlocks, Shamans. These are all hardcore raid compositions are going to have, or optimized raid compositions are, to my knowledge, going to have multiples of each of these classes. So they will be very popular. They will be essentially the warriors of TBC, for anyone familiar with the extreme domination of DPS warriors in Classic. So we'll see all of those represented in most optimized raid compositions. So looking through the PvE guides for each of them, they've started being made. If you go to you can probably find the classic discords that will have a lot of information about what consumables they will target. Then you can start finding out where you get the recipes you want, which ones you want to get first, and plan out how you approach the game at launch to get to the best recipes as soon as possible. In addition, of course, there's not just consumables we can craft to help other players. We have gear, which has been a thing throughout the entire game's history. In Classic, there were a couple of items that are actually best in slot that you could craft, including the famous Lionheart helmet. Now, in TBC, there's a lot of very powerful crafted gear available. Both for yourself, there's some bind and pickup gear that you have to have the specific profession to craft, and there's some items that are tradable. I'm not going to list everything here, obviously, because you can look this up on Wowhead. Tailoring relies on daily cooldown cloths, which depend on which cloth specialization you've chosen. They're going to be similar to Mooncloth, and having multiple professionals or multiple tailors ready to go at level 60 and just getting them to where they can craft these items is going to be very profitable, particularly early on. Because since they're a daily cooldown, they're going to be a throttle on how fast these items can be crafted. And these cooldown items are going to sell for a lot early on. And people are going to hit level 70 probably a lot faster than they hit 60 at launch of Classic. So these items are probably going to be very, very expensive, very profitable to craft early on and sell. Or if you're just planning to get into raiding ASAP on your cloth casters, you'll want to run those cooldowns for yourself just to get your gear as fast as possible. People right now, at least like the guides I've seen, people heavily suggest stockpiling your gold if you're playing Classic. So I expect a lot of people will be sitting on a lot of gold going into TBC and will be looking to splash it out. So prices on certain things are probably going to go through the absolute roof, which is going to be fun and definitely an opportunity not to miss. For some of the other professions, we have stuff like Primal Might transmutes. That's also going to limit the availability of the item, which is also on a 20-hour cooldown. So definitely having some professionals with cooldown alts is going to be really good. If for the items that are tradable, you may want to trade the full armor or craft the full armor. You can, of course, try to craft the item and sell it, or you can advertise that you can craft it if there are hard-to-get recipes. This has always been the case, and I expect that players will be behaving very similarly to in Classic, where they use trade chat a lot to try to find crafters. People are still going to be in the mindset of having like a server identity. They're going to have like the famous crafters are going to talk, the guilds are going to talk together. Oh yeah, we have a guy who can craft item X that's hard to get recipe, and all of that jazz is gonna... I expect we'll see a lot of that still in TBC. So definitely take advantage if you get some rare recipes and just be ready with all of the materials, because one thing, a lot of people min-maxed in Classic, but I think a lot of more people are going to min-max at the TBC launch, because a lot of them have learned from Classic and realized that it's more fun to come prepared. In many cases, it's more fun when things go smoothly. Now, the last category of items is the item enhancements, as I like to call them. This is going to be enchanting and jewel crafting primarily. Now, jewel crafting is coming, and as I said on the last time I talked about TBC, for me that's almost a reason enough by itself to play TBC. Because OG jewel crafting was my favorite gold making profession ever. Sockets are incredibly numerous in TBC. Incredibly numerous. There's a lot of sockets. Items can have up to 3 sockets. Many of the best items in the game will have sockets because it allows you to itemize perfectly. Or at least more perfectly. You can get like the perfect amount of hit because you can use one hit gem and then other gems. And yeah. Then you also have the meta gems, which you put in your head piece. And yeah, it's just going to be a great profession. Now, many players, of course, know about the gold making potential, which is going to increase competition for sure. But a lot of people knew about the gold making potential of alchemy, or at least guessed about it, and there was a lot of competition, but I still made a lot of gold. One thing that's good about jewel crafting from a gold making point of view is that the PvE benefits of jewel crafting is a special cheap epic gem. But number one, you can craft tons of these early on and then just keep them in your bank. They're unique equipped, so you can stockpile them and then you can swap to something else. And I know that a lot of people are going to really min-max their professions, which entails doing that. And once we get to the later tiers, then the difference between the jewel crafter only epic gems and the best gems available is going to be a lot smaller. Which means that some of the other professions will give you a larger relative stat upgrade. So long term, I don't think that many people will stick with jewel crafting, but early on there could be a lot of competition. Now, enchanting, on the other hand, is going to be very similar to classic in that there is some gold making potential, but it's quite a lot of work to get there. You have to sell your enchants live. Vellums for trading enchants on the auction house did not arrive until Wrath. And generally speaking, I've found that in Classic, the enchanting service, the fees for enchanting were incredibly low across the board. And on top of that, in TBC, enchanting is one of the absolute best professions to have for the profession bonus you get to your stats, because you get special ring enchants. So I think a lot of players will be rolling enchanting, which means that the market for selling enchants is going to be very saturated. Now, one thing you can definitely do with enchanting is to shuffle cloth or other materials and sell leveling materials. As I talked about last time, that's the first gold making method I learned was in TBC. It was shuffling Mage Weave cloth into Vision Dust, and everyone who wants to level enchanting will have to level through classic zones. And typically, some of them, Vision Dust was one of the bottlenecks. So that's going to be very exciting, and it's particularly later on down the line when we run out of classic materials because people spend much less time in classic zones and more time in TBC zones. So that's going to be very interesting long term. There's definitely a lot of potential shuffles with classic materials, and there's going to be potential shuffles for the TBC materials as well. Now, I think that what was interesting about Classic was that we saw continuous inflation of prices. Prices have gone up throughout the entire Classic life cycle for most items. Of course, this is tied to the gold supply. There was 0 gold on day 1, and every day we generate more and more gold, and there are so many mages doing AoE farming generating a large amount of raw gold every day, much more than we did back then. There are people with absolutely ludicrous amounts of gold already. So it'll be a very interesting boom or bust or boom cycle during the launch of TBC. There's a lot more raw gold resources in the game, and people are ready to spend them to gear up very quickly. Now, this time around, I think we might actually see what we typically see in the retail version of WoW, where prices are very high at launch and then trend downwards as people finish their initial crafting and gearing cycle. And this is going to be what I most likely expect. Obviously, I can't be sure, but that's what I expect. It will, of course, depend on how efficient in terms of raw gold any TBC-based farming methods are. Is there going to be AoE leveling in TBC, AoE boosting? Is it going to generate as much raw gold or even more raw gold as what people are doing in Solgorub or Maradon or whatever they're doing it in Classic? We don't know that yet for sure. If that's more efficient, then we could be seeing even larger inflation, and we could see prices trend upwards throughout TBC. If not, then I'm expecting prices to level off and may even go down as we go into the expansion. So yeah, that's my thoughts on gold making in TBC. When I researched this episode, I actually got a lot more hyped for TBC than I was initially. So I'm sure I'll be playing it. We'll see how much time I dedicate to it, but I'll be playing my Warlock, and I will 110% be going for jewel crafting. Not sure what the other profession will be. We'll have to probably tailoring for the benefits to myself, and then we'll take it from there. I don't plan to raid hardcore, so I don't plan to pick leatherworking. I might if I decide to raid down the line, but most likely I'd rather not try hard that much in a classic version of the game. So, are you playing TBC? What are you planning to make money with? Have any great ideas? Then do let me know. If you enjoyed the episode, then make sure you leave a like or a comment below. It really helps us out, and subscribe to the channel. And with that, I wish you all a very profitable week. Goodbye, guys.